Okay, we're going to try something interesting. This is going to test agentic generation of actual game content. So we're going to try directly generating a map using Claude. So I'll explain what I have up on my screen first. I've got GitHub Desktop. This is just showing that I have a clean commit other than this prompt that I just wrote. We'll be using this to make sure that Claude doesn't touch any files that it's not supposed to. The most important thing is the prompt. So I've written a spec that says we should produce a playable map, and I've given it instructions. You should not edit any other files besides the map that you're creating. A list of features here. So this is, we should be using dungeon biome, 50 by 50 tiles. It should be creating an interesting floor plan, should be aesthetically pleasing, should have a song file defined, some spawners. It does not need transition zones to other maps. I realized I had unfinished thought there. A container with some reward items, NPC with dialogue that makes sense, a unique map name, be specific there, transition, polygon, defined as the player's starting zone. And then I give it some information about map geometry. So the map structure, these are the enums for tile types. AirPig uses an integer grid as its map core definition. That's how it can swap biomes, because the map itself is just a grid of none, background, floor, path, or wall tiles, and then it constructs the actual visual tiles based on that grid. So Claude should be able to just directly generate map geometry by creating, like a maze grid of floor tiles or something. We'll see. I give a little bit of information about how it's stored and serialized. Everything needs unique IDs generated. A little bit about sprites and the map layers they can be placed on. Entities can be on a team. Entities can have behavior, which are defined in its rigs. So this is just going to help it make sense of the rigs. And then finally, the types of polygon zone behaviors. So this is just helps it make sense of what it's reading in other maps, but it should be able to read other maps and then come up with something. So we're about to find out. Now I guess we just sit here. And through the magic of video, we are back. So Claude finished. First of all, let's talk about, I think it took about 22 minutes, 21 minutes and 56 seconds. The other thing is, just to be transparent, it used about 30% of my session tokens on a pro plan. By the time somebody is watching this video, all AI pricing is probably irrelevant because it changes constantly. It doesn't tell me the total token burn, but I think it was between 75,000 and 100,000 tokens. So it did burn quite a bit. I think there's a huge amount of optimization that could be done to the spec, like if this was actually a skill. But let's kind of quickly talk about what it did. It looked at the existing map and rig files. It looked at the item files to understand the item entities and how they attach. It spent quite a while looking at the humanoid rig specifically, because it's a really complicated rig that has a lot of variants, like skeletons and other things that spawn are variants of the humanoid rig. Then it actually tried to run Python scripts a couple times. I don't think I actually have Python installed, so it fell back to using PowerShell, which I think was a little bit less efficient, but it did use that to base64 encode the map tiles, which was part of the spec to produce a map. I think it failed to figure out how dialogue works. So again, that's another thing I could optimize into a skill, is explain a little bit more about the files. I gave it a pretty bare minimum of information. If I just gave it access to the models folder in the actual engine source, it would probably do a lot better at understanding where dialogues go. One thing it kept doing is trying to look at rigs for dialogue, but dialogue is defined on instances because a rig doesn't have hard-coded dialogue baked into the rig itself. It's on each instance in the map. So I think it failed to understand that. I did try to create some dialogue. I saw it doing that, but I don't know if it worked out. It looked at some different rigs, then it created the map, did some verification on the tile count, and made sure that it was structurally correct. It had to run quite a few different PowerShell scripts there to check like the encoding and some things like that. It has a thought process, so an entry chamber, main hall, left guard room, right guard room, a treasure vault, and a crypt chamber, rows of gravestones flanked by dungeon statues. So that's going to be interesting. Slower, tougher bruiser skeletons, skeleton rushers. So it kind of understood a little bit. Oh, and an NPC, a wandering spirit named as a ghost of past explorer. Okay. H+ vertical arms layout. So it chose a song. NPC with multiple sentence. Okay. 3 enemy spawner zones, player spawn transition, no outgoing transition zones. Dialogue is inferred since no field example exists in the codebase. That's not true. It just was looking in the wrong place. So, I called it Catacombs of Shadowmere. Okay, let's switch over to the engine and actually see what we've got here. So this is what a map should look like. This is a well-formed map that I hand authored. We'll load up Catacombs of Shadowmere. And structurally, I don't hate it. I think these artifacts you're seeing are actually easily fixable. I think what happened is it didn't fill in all of this. It needs to be filled with wall for this to correctly fill. So I think if I just set a tile type of wall and fill in this other space, boom, all those walls are fixed. So actually it was correct in its structure. It just didn't know that it needed to fill all these tiles in between with wall for that to resolve. Functionally, just in the data sense, it was accurate in that it put a single line of walls around stuff. And so that was an easy fix. We've got some rigs here. These are well placed. This actually may even be valid nav mesh. It is. Turn that back off because it's disruptive. Here's our NPC. Let's look at our spawners. So we've got a transition zone that's player spawn, and it's even named correctly. We've got the main hall spawner, which is going to spawn 4 skeleton rushers and keep 4 active at a time, and it's going to spawn them forever, infinitely. So that's a choice. This is rushers. So these were rushers. These are rushers, but it didn't give them equipment. So that's actually going to fail. I don't have unarmed attacks built yet. So it didn't understand how to give them equipment. Again, easily fixed with some better prompting. And then this NPC, I think it probably failed. First of all, it didn't give it any clothes either. Again, easily tuned with prompting, unnamed dialogue, and it's empty and has no sprite. So it failed on the dialogue structure. Be interesting to look at that actual JSON. Oh, one other thing we can check is it added the map. Actually, I think the game engine did this when it found the map in the folder, so it didn't actually change the project pig file. And then it generated the map, so it didn't touch anything that it shouldn't have. It did generate a map. Let's see if it actually plays. We've got enemies, but they have no weapons, so they're not going to path towards us. Oh, I forgot to look at what item it put in the chest, so we'll go check that. Very, very narrow corridors. You could fit through them, but like only just. So again, easy prompting fix to tell it how wide to generate like a minimum width for corridors and things like that. And after fighting through all these skeletons, we get a wooden dagger. Also, a human would probably put the treasure after you fight through the enemies. And we have an empty dialogue. So, I mean, it is a well-formed map, like more or less, and all things considered pretty successful. I think learnings here are that it's highly inefficient. It took a long time and burned way more tokens than I think it needs to. Probably you could give it a map, like an empty map as an example. Also give it dialogue, basically just examples of everything that it could reference, write in like a skill, minimum corridor widths, some best practices. There's some things like that. Those are a little too close to the walls. It didn't understand, because I didn't actually point it at the engine source, anything about the fact that it's not purely top down. This is a sort of 3/4 or 2/3 projection. And so it doesn't know how to compensate for that perspective. Like placing these in a pure data sense should have been a logical placement. So all of those are things that you could fix and tune with some examples that are a little bit more simple and easier for it to read, of like, here's what one room looks like. Here's how to place some entities. It also only placed barrels, and then it placed gravestones. This would make sense if these were like stone coffins, but gravestones, like these are intended for like a graveyard. So a lot of context that was missing, but it did produce, a viable sort of map layout. It put some things in here. It got the spawners right. And so I think there's a potential that you could actually rapidly prototype some different map ideas with a little bit better guidance. Anyway, just a fun experiment. I thought I would just try live and see what happened.